latest on gun litigation, the best and worst run cities according to WalletHub, shoring up SNAP error rates, tracking police accountability, veterans incentives, and much more. Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Thursday, June 25th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. The U.S. Supreme Court today ruling against the state of Hawaii's default ban on carrying firearms in public places. Now, the so-called vampire rule in the case Wolford v. Lopez was the focus of the challenge. Hawaii's law bans carrying of firearms on property open to the public, like grocery stores, restaurants, gas stations, and more, unless the owner posts a sign stating that carrying is allowed on the premises. Now, the Second Amendment Foundation says prior laws permitted lawful carry in businesses open to the public unless the owner affirmatively requested that guns not be carried. Now, the flipping of the default situation from allowing guns unless denied to banning all guns unless invited created a de facto public carry ban that Second Amendment advocates fought against. And today, the U.S. Supreme Court held that Hawaii's law violated the Second Amendment. Now, prevailing justices, they reiterated their prior rulings on the Second Amendment that a court must determine whether the law being challenged clashes with the plain text of the Second Amendment, which reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Now, if a challenged law falls within the plain text of the Second Amendment, Justice Alito said, it is presumptively unconstitutional. We'll have more on that story at thecentersquare.com. Meanwhile, yesterday, the Tennessee Court of Appeals heard a case that could decide if a ruling declaring two Tennessee gun laws will stand. The Center Square Associate Editor Kim Jarrett reports the Tennessee laws prohibited carrying firearms in state parks and carrying a gun or club with the intent to go armed and use it for violence or aggression. Now, a three-judge panel of the Gibson County Chancery Court said that the two laws were unconstitutional, void, and of no effect back in August of 2025, which the state appealed and the Court of Appeals heard Tuesday. John Harris, representing the Gun Owners of America and others, said he believes the three-judge panel had the inherent authority because it's separate and independent. He argued the law is unconstitutional.
These rights were infringed when the legislature exceeded its constitutional boundaries by enacting a statutory scheme that criminalizes by default all the conduct subsumed within the scope of those constitutional protections. Those statutory schemes make it a crime for every person at all times in all places within the state, including their own homes, to possess a firearm for the purpose of being armed. The unanimous three-judge panel declared the legislature's statutory scheme to be unconstitutional and void.
Now, the court didn't indicate when it would make a decision on that case out of Tennessee. Meanwhile, litigants are in Virginia federal court today in an attempt to block Virginia's ban on certain semi-automatic firearms and public carry restrictions. The laws signed by Virginia Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger are set to take effect July 1st. And in other litigation, there's been no movement on the case challenging Illinois' gun ban. That law was put into effect in 2023 and challenged all throughout the judiciary, going up and down back to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. That case awaits a ruling on that panel, which heard the case back in September. Another Illinois case, federal lawsuit against the state's firearm owner's ID card, state requirement for individuals to have a state police-issued identification in order to buy or keep firearms and ammunition. State defendants there, they motioned for an extension to respond to the lawsuit, and the judge granting that for July 13th. We'll keep you updated on the latest regarding the Second Amendment and challenges in the courts. Get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. On this 250th year of the founding of the United States of America and the Declaration of Independence, there are a lot of celebrations to be had as the country continues to reflect on the founding principles. Now, some have said the U.S., a constitutional republic, is like a lab where 50 different democracies test out ideas. In 1932, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said that it is one of the happy incidents of the federal system that a single courageous state may, if its citizens choose, serve as a laboratory and try novel social and economic experience without risk to the rest of the country. But how are states and their largest cities performing? How do those ideas and policies implemented by elected officials using your tax dollars perform? Well, I talked earlier with a WalletHub analyst to get more insight. Just how well run is your city? And where does it rank compared to nearly 150 other of the nation's largest cities? Are you getting the level of services that you're paying for with your tax dollars? How about public safety, education, economic and environmental conditions? How are those rated? Well, joining us here on The States to discuss WalletHub's 2026 Best and Worst Run Cities in America report is WalletHub analyst Chip Lupo. Chip, thanks for taking time with us here for The States. So let's just get to the chase here. Who watching is living in the best run city?
It's interesting because of the best run cities. The top 5 are in 3 states, and 3 of those are in the mountain region. So the top 5, Provo, Utah, Nampa, Idaho, Manchester, New Hampshire, Boise, Idaho, Nashua, New Hampshire. So it's and these are all medium-sized cities. So generally speaking, when you have a smaller to a medium-sized city, it's easier. It's more effective. You can more effectively manage your population as opposed to maybe some of these larger sprawling urban areas.
Now, the analysts there at WalletHub, you guys look at all kinds of different metrics. It's not like you're just throwing a dart onto a dartboard and saying, "Hey, they got the best run city." Talk about some of the metrics that you guys have across the different key areas.
Right now, there's 36 metrics that fall under 2 categories: quality of city services and total budget per capita rank. Now, those include everything from, obviously, your Moody's city credit rating, things such as high school graduations, infant mortality rates, even things like average life expectancy, hospital beds per capita. And then we get into sort of the economic factors, like things such as unemployment rates. Underemployment rates is one that people tend to overlook, which obviously are situations in which you're working at several pay grades below your qualifications, or in some cases if you're working part-time or multiple part-time jobs because you're in an economic environment in which full-time jobs are hard to come by. Now, when there's a lack of full-time jobs, there's usually a lack of benefits, which often includes health care. So in a lot of these cases, access and quality becomes an issue. We also look at things such as the change in housing prices, quality of roads, and the share of population living in poverty, just a wide range of metrics. So yeah, we just didn't just throw these in a hat and pull them out and rank them 1 to 148.
Yeah, and 36 metrics to judge for nearly 150 different large cities. I would imagine that's a lot of work you guys did there at WalletHub. And again, they break down into 6 key areas, as you heard Chip talk about: financial stability, education, health, safety, economy, infrastructure, and pollution. But let's talk about, I guess, take Provo, Utah, number 1, right? I mean, we got 10 of the best run cities showing there. And like you said, Utah being number 1, you got Idaho, New Hampshire in the mix, South Dakota's in the mix, Indiana, cities in these various jurisdictions. But compare that with, bottom of the pack, San Francisco, California. How come Provo did so much better than ranked number 148, San Francisco?
Well, Greg, generally speaking, your best run cities are, for the most part, byproducts of the states that they're in. Now, in the Mountain West, states like Idaho and Utah are very efficiently run, as is New Hampshire, which is kind of an outlier in the high tax, high cost of living Northeast, because there's a vibrant economy in New Hampshire. And what's interesting, though, is this is all the after effects of the Doge movement that we saw a year and a half ago, where massive fraud and waste was exposed in the federal government. So what that's done is it raised the eyebrows of not only the taxpayers, but also within some of the leadership in some of these cities, because people understand that taxation is an essential part of doing business to provide government services, but people want accountability and transparency, knowing that the tax dollars they're paying are going to be providing the kind of services, that the quality of service and services that they want. And what city and state leaders understand is that, unlike the federal government, they can't print money. So it could be very, very easy for a city, for a state to go bankrupt. So there's been a push to kind of create more efficiently run cities. Now, you can do that in the framework of some of these places like Nashville, New Hampshire, that are moderately sized, small to medium sized cities, smaller populations, smaller budgets per capita. I'm not saying they're underfunded, but smaller budgets per capita. You can more effectively manage those. Now, juxtapose that with the bottom of the list, where you have places like Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, Chicago, Oakland, New York, Detroit, San Francisco. Seeing a trend here, these are large urban areas, sprawling urban areas that not only have large populations, but they have large populations that come into the state, that are commuting into these cities for business or for government purposes. And when you have massive populations and massive budgets, a lot of times it's hard to keep track of all that money, and sort of harder for accountability and transparency. And in a lot of cases in New York, I guess you said, but Detroit is a prime example of one where the budget gets so overblown that there's plenty of room for corruption.
Yeah, and then we saw the top 10 there, the bottom 10, including Tacoma, Washington, Long Beach, California, Fresno, California, Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, Oakland, California, New York, Detroit, Michigan, and San Francisco, California. And again, you see California on the list several times. You see New York on the list as well. It seems to be that, these larger states, is it the policies, the tax policies, the public safety policies that are playing into some of these rankings?
It's a combination of both, because what you'll find is that how well a city is run is usually a byproduct of how the state is being run. And as you know, you have states like California and Illinois that are teetering on the verge of bankruptcy, irresponsible spending. Nobody knows where the money is. This famous bridge to nowhere in California that's taken forever. And there's no
or the high-speed rail that's costing billions.
So in those types of projects. And I do think if your state is poorly run, that's going to reflect in your cities in a lot of cases. Now, you do have some outliers, because in a state like California, you do have some outliers, like Huntington Beach, California, for example, has the highest quality of city services in the state in our study. Now, Huntington Beach is sort of a more fiscally conservative. Orange County, which is traditionally, now trends are changing a little bit because of immigration, has always kind of gone against the grain in Sacramento. It's kind of done its own thing and been a little bit more fiscally conservative and responsible. So even within some of these massive states with huge budgets and failed economic policies, you do find an outlier in which a city does quite well. But generally speaking, the cities tend to follow the lead of the state, how the state's being run.
Your report does kind of break out two different areas, and I want to touch on these briefly here. Long-term debt outstanding per capita. That was one area you guys looked at. And, this is different from the overall general score. Talk about that category and what you're seeing on each end of the spectrum.
Yeah, because what we did is we broke down, we have the overall ranking, in which Provo, Utah is number one, and that breaks down into total budget per capita, which that includes some of these metrics, such as outstanding long-term debt per capita, the Moody's credit rating, and we also have the quality of services rank. So we have your overall ranking, in which, again, the Northeast, New Hampshire, and some of these mountain states do well. But from that, we come up with a quality of service score. Now, and we just mentioned it, Huntington Beach has the highest quality of city services. Now, of course, there are things, financial stability and high cost of living come into effect, but when you factor in things such as education, health, safety, and economy, all those together creates a better environment, a better picture, more snapshot rather than just deficits and sizes of budget. So in Huntington Beach, it winds up being number one, followed by Virginia Beach, Madison, Wisconsin, Charleston, South Carolina, and then Nashua, New Hampshire is the fifth run in terms of quality of services.
And in other areas, you delve a little bit deeper in the report, just to highlight for people seeing this at WalletHub, is the high school graduation rate, but I'll let people go find that for themselves. Chip, it sounds like there's a lot of lessons that could be gleaned by city leaders from this particular report. Final thoughts? Again,
you have to decide if, and again, cities are more or less byproducts of their states. You want to look at how your state is doing, and if your state is doing well, you obviously want to emulate that. If your state is doing poorly economically, you kind of want to buck that trend and maybe petition to get some of those city leaders into state government so the states can eventually run themselves more efficiently.
WalletHub analyst Chip Lupo, thank you so much for taking time with us here on The States. We'll be right back.
Why would we intentionally build a system that waits until after benefits have been issued before verifying eligibility? Why would we spend $16 million on a website that you simply just put in your name and address? It's absurd.
U.S. states and territories made a collective $10 billion in improper payments to SNAP recipients nationwide in fiscal year 2025, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That's $10 billion of taxpayer funds on improper payments in just 1 year through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that the federal government grants to states who administer the subsidy to individuals. The Center Square reporter, Therese Boudreau, reports the average error payment rates, which includes both over and underpayments, was roughly 10.6%. That's well above the congressionally set threshold of 6%. USDA Secretary Brooke Collins said these payment error rates are further proof that state accountability is severely lacking in SNAP. She said USDA has taken historic action to help interested states curb SNAP waste, and that she hopes other states, regardless of political leadership, prioritize needy families and the American taxpayer over politics. Now, Alaska, the District of Columbia, New Mexico, Delaware, and Georgia had the highest average payment error rates, all surpassing 15%, with Alaska topping at 23%. As you can see there, New Mexico had 16.81%, Connecticut 16%. Now, the findings are an early warning sign for states and territories with average payment error rates at or above 6%. Starting in fiscal year 2027, which begins October 1st that year, states and territories that don't get their error rate average down, they're going to be shouldering a larger percentage of the program's administrative costs, meaning state taxpayers will have to pick up the tab. Unlike with other federal entitlement programs, states currently do not contribute any dollars to actual SNAP benefits. It's 100% funded by federal taxpayers. Now, state taxpayers do cover about 50% of administrative costs, but overall spending in the U.S. by taxpayers is $101.7 billion just in 2025. Now, under congressional Republicans' One Big Beautiful Bill, which became law last year, states or territories with SNAP payment error rates at or over 6% will pay 75% of the program's administrative costs. That'll also be responsible for covering up to 15% of their state's benefit costs, depending on how high the error rate is. Again, state taxpayers will have to cover that cost. Currently, only 10 governors can claim average SNAP payment error rates below 6%. Here's a look at the 5 bottom error rates by state. South Dakota had the lowest at 2.47%, Idaho 3.85%, Wyoming almost 4%, Kentucky at 4.7%, and Iowa at 5.34%. Now, South Dakota with that lowest, roughly around 2%, and the lowest overpayment error rate, roughly 2.5%. Overall payment error rates and overpayment error rates were less than 4% in Idaho and Wyoming. Now, other states still facing higher error rates, Pennsylvania being one of them. Their error rate's at 9.21%. And earlier this week, in the Pennsylvania legislature, State Senator Lisa Boscola urged for more to be done, including tightening enforcement against card skimmers that can steal SNAP benefits without a consumer even knowing it.
As of May 2026, more than 1.7 million Pennsylvanians receive SNAP benefits, including children, seniors, people with disabilities, and families trying to make ends meet. The scale of this theft is unacceptable. In 2024 alone, the Office of State Inspector General reported that 15 million in SNAP benefits was stolen through skimming. And according to recent reports, Pennsylvania has already seen more than 5,100 EBT skimming cases from the start of this year through May, totaling approximately 2.5 million in stolen benefits. Every dollar stolen from a SNAP benefit recipient is a dollar stolen twice. First, from the family receiving and relying on those benefits for groceries, and second, from the taxpayers who fund these programs.
Now, in Michigan, with a SNAP error rate of nearly 10%, State Representative Jason Wolford earlier this week, he pushed for more accountability on the floor of the chamber of who's getting such benefits, saying that identity verification is done almost everywhere a consumer goes.
Can you imagine Disney? They don't allow people to simply walk into the park and then after the fact go and check for tickets after they enjoyed all the rides. Yet somehow, when it comes to taxpayer-funded public assistance programs, which are worth billions of dollars, by the way, DHHS, SNAP benefits, $4 billion business, we're told that they should approve first and then verify later. That's absurd, and so I respectfully disagree. I've heard the argument that department catches problems on the back end. But I would ask, why would we intentionally build a system that waits until after benefits have been issued before verifying eligibility? Why would we spend $16 million on a website that you simply just put in your name and address? It's absurd.
Now, states continue to grapple with high error rates, tighter eligibility requirements from the federal government, and the potential of losing some federal tax funds only to be covered by local state taxpayer funds. Some are taking steps to give state tax dollars to certain individuals who may lose their benefits because of enhanced eligibility requirements. For example, in Illinois, as part of the state budget that was enacted, set to start July 1st, the Families Receiving Emergency Support for Hunger, or FRESH program, will provide a one-time lump sum payment of $400 to households that are subject to changes in eligibility and work requirements for the federal food assistance. Be sure to get the latest at thecentersquare.com. We'll be right back with more from the States.
Still on the budget committee, what would your recommendation be if Berkeley were to come back and ask for more money for continued funding?
Not a dime. Not a dime.
California will stop funding a statewide database intended to uncover police misconduct and use of force records. UC Berkeley received a $6.87 million appropriation of California taxpayer money to fund the website back in 2023, but the funds will expire at the end of this month. Joining us to discuss this further is the Center Square investigative reporter, Adam Herbets. Adam, thanks for taking time with us. For the states, the Police Records Access Project launched in 2025 with roughly 1.5 million pages of internal law enforcement records from 1965 to 2024. You reviewed a lot of this. What did you find out?
Well, we found out there was nothing from 2025 or 2026. This was launched in 2025, but the newest records at that time were from 2024. And as we sit here today, June 2026, there's only been one case from the last 2 years. So it's a great resource if it's up to date. I would argue it's a great resource for historical data. Look, when I'm doing a story on an officer who might have done something wrong, I'll still use the website. I'll go in, I'll type in that officer's name, see if there's any cases of misconduct, use of force, shootings. But you got to know going into it, at least at this point, you're not going to have recent data. In fact, we found a case from the Los Angeles Police Department that they themselves put out. They included the body camera video of an officer shooting a man. That was from 2024. It still was not in this database. So at this point, there's no way to say that it's up to date. And that's why taxpayers are questioning that $6-7 million price tag and wondering if there's a better way to do this.
Yeah, you got a statement from Lisa Pickhoff-White, the director of research for the Police Records Access Project at UC Berkeley. She said that whether we receive more funding is up to the legislature and other funders. Further funding would allow us to release more records and to continue to gather the records and to continue to make improvements and release more information. How much are they looking to get either from the legislature or, as they said, other funders?
That's the question that I asked that I never really got a straight answer to. And in Lisa's defense, she isn't really authorized to talk about the funding questions. But the person who is authorized to talk about it, when I was making these requests back in April and May, said he was busy with finals. Now I found out he's on a sabbatical. So I want to know, how much are they asking for? Are they getting what they're asking for? And it sounds like the answer is no. At the end of this month, the money runs out. So they've got, 6 days left to spend what they have left if they want to keep upgrading this website. The question of whether there's a better way to do it or not, police chiefs say yes. They say, at least the good ones say, it's on us to be transparent in the first place. They shouldn't be giving all this money to a university to pull it out of us, to file lawsuits if necessary. But that's why state lawmakers are asking, well, why not just run the website through the state itself and have the attorney general hold them accountable?
You talked with Assembly Member Carl DeMeo out of San Diego. Here's what he had to say.
Was not aware of this particular program. Good idea, bad implementation. I think that transparency is wonderful. And, if we want to improve trust and confidence in policing, we need to make sure that we have a transparent process for people to see allegations and responses and activity. So you know what? If they think that this is so important to get this information, get this website going, set up the website through the Attorney General's office, and if people don't comply, they can be contacted by the Attorney General. But no, instead they're giving all this money to Berkeley. Oh, Newsom and Bonta have all the time in the world and all the lawyers in the world to go after local government on certain topics, but not on this one. You see that this is politics.
If you were still on the budget committee, what would your recommendation be if Berkeley were to come back and ask for more money for continued funding?
Not a dime. Not a dime. If the Attorney General and the governor think it's so important, they can easily get this information and set it up. And I would consider an appropriation for a very specific project to set up the website, maintain it. But that shouldn't be but a fraction of what Berkeley's been given.
Now, Adam, obviously, this is something that people are concerned about, the police accountability, making sure that the public records are available to, as you said, even if you've got a story about a particular police officer, you want to kind of go back into the records and see what they may have done in the past and whether those cases were rectified and closed with appropriate actions. What's going to happen next year? Is there going to just be a black hole for the year 25 and the year 26 and the year 27 and all this information there on the website from previous years?
I don't think so, and I hope not. Regardless of whether they're getting more state funding, it sounds like they were still filing records requests, which is a long and hard process. I don't know how many agencies there are in California. If I had to guess, over 500, maybe over 600 police departments across the state that they're trying to request records from. So yeah, it is a lot of work. I think they're using AI to help with that process, screen the records. Part of the reason for the delays, they say, is sometimes the police departments release a little bit more than they should. Sometimes they forget to redact a victim's phone number or the name of a sexual assault victim. So they want to make sure that they put a second set of eyes on it to make sure that police departments aren't accidentally releasing information that they shouldn't. But at the same time, when I asked how often is the website updated, the response was it's been updated at least once. I asked, why are there not any cases yet, at least from 2025? They said they're just now starting that process of requesting the records from 2025, and that was in May 2026. And look, I get it. It is a lot of records. It's a lot of cases, but sometimes one case makes all the difference. So when you're looking at it in terms of quantity versus quality, there's an argument to be made for both sides, but sometimes information on one case is all the public needs to know, understand, and care about the issues in their community.
And as you talked with the council member or the assembly member, DeMaio, but also with law enforcement officials, is there another way to do this other than giving $7 million to a university who's probably tapping interns to come on board and help out with data collection and whatnot? Is there a better way to do this that you're hearing from your sources?
Well, the good chiefs of police, the ones that really do care about transparency and want to get out ahead of this, they'll tell me that this is already part of their job. They shouldn't have to allocate more resources to something that's a fundamental part of their jobs, which is transparency. But there is the other side of that coin, which is if police departments get caught kind of picking and choosing which cases to release, that's not going to be good either. So that's why it's still important to have journalists, to have people like Lisa and her team that give it a second set of eyes. And the Center Square does that, and news agencies across the country do that. But when we look at California, they are uploading a lot of this information already through California Post, Peace Officer Standards and Training. So to act like it would be this heavy lift to be transparent, to dig up these records, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that.
Adam Herbetz, investigative reporter for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate your work and the team from the investigative staff. Be sure to get the latest at thecentersquare.com. We'll be right back. States across the country regularly honor military veterans with various acknowledgments and praise and benefits. Some looking to do more. In the state of California this week, there have been several bills proposed. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. California State Senator Bob Archuleta, he proposed Senate Bill 1407 in California, spelling out that the measure is an opportunity for the state to serve those who serve the country and to send a message that California has veterans' backs. But he also said the bill aims to keep veterans from fleeing the state of California.
This bill, it will exempt the first $40,000 of a veteran's military retirement pay, as well as a surviving spouse benefit payment from the state taxes, as long as they make $125,000 or less as a single or head of household filer, or $250,000 as a married couple. Between 2010 and 2022, Californians lost over 24,000 military retirees, as a retention challenge, and as it grows, we must recognize the fiscal policy plays a role in long-term decisions. Keeping veterans in California must be a priority.
Now, California joins a handful of other states that have lost population to other states over the years. And hearing that number of veterans that are fleeing the state of California, it'd be interesting to see if such a policy as this one would reverse that trend and keep veterans in California. Meanwhile, California State Senator Kelly Serrardo says Senate Bill 888, and that would exempt disability benefits as an element when looking at property tax exemptions. He said that actions have already been taken to exempt such income, disability income, from federal housing qualifications. He's looking to do even more for veterans on disability.
Disability compensation is not a source of wealth. It is a recognition of service-connected injuries and a loss of earning capacity, and falls under the category of an insurance. This bill is a proactive step to keep 100% disabled veterans in their homes and reduce their risk of homelessness or housing instability by ensuring that the tax code does not punish them for receiving disability compensation. SB 888 simply excludes VA service-connected disability compensation from the calculation of household income for purposes of the low-income disabled veterans property tax exemption, so veterans are not penalized for receiving the benefits that they have so deservedly earned.
Businesses are also lined up to possibly have more state contracts with a separate measure that legislators heard this week. Currently, disabled veterans who have businesses, they may be awarded contracts of up to $250,000, but that total amount has not stayed up with inflation.
Adjusted for inflation, that $250,000 equivalent to about $350,000 today, making this update both practical and necessary. In response to stakeholders' concerns about how this increase would impact goods contracts, the amendments make sure that the cap is only increased for service and IT industries and ensures it keeps pace with inflation by tying it to the CPI. Importantly, this bill does not establish $350,000 as a floor. It remains a ceiling. Contracts under $350,000 will continue to be offered while expanding access and opportunity for small businesses who are ready and able to scale up across the state. I've been engaging thoughtfully with the opposition on this bill and will continue to do so. The goal of this bill is to expand opportunities for small businesses and veterans, not to limit them.
And yet another measure heard this week from Assemblymember Chris Ward would give special consideration to certain individuals that are let go from military service. Here's him explaining various components of his measure.
First, this bill prioritizes veterans who experience trauma or discrimination for assistance under the existing Veterans Military Discharge Upgrade Grant Program, helping them access discharge upgrades when needed. Second, it funds service providers that offer no-cost housing support to veterans facing sudden income and employment loss due to abrupt or delayed separations. And third, AB 1775 expands eligibility for expedited state professional licensing to include veterans discharged solely because of Executive Order 14183, helping them transition into civilian careers without any unnecessary bureaucratic delay. While California cannot control any federal executive actions, of course, we can reinforce our commitment that those who serve our country are not pushed into unemployment, housing instability, or long-term economic hardship because of discriminatory federal policy. At its core, AB 1775 is about dignity, fairness, and stability. When service members raise their right hand to defend our country, California must ensure that we do not abandon them when federal policy turns its back on them.
Now, according to the Veterans Administration, there are nearly 1.47 million veterans living in California. In Florida, there's about 1.41 million veterans living there. In Texas, they have more veterans than California and Florida at 1.53 million. Now, in total across the country, there's 18.2 million veterans living across all 50 states and territories. And we'll be right back with more from the states. Welcome back to the States. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Governor Jeff Landry vetoing more than $12 million in state construction funding earmarked for New Orleans projects, the latest flashpoint in increasingly contentious relationship between the governor and city leaders. Center Square Louisiana reporter Nolan McKendry reports vetoed line items include $1 million for New City Hall, $1.75 million for an early learning center, $3 million for housing projects through Habitat for Humanity, $1 million for the LaSalle Street Resilience Center, and $6.5 million for an integrated healthcare hub. Now, the veto does not necessarily remove immediately deployable cash. Most of the funding is tied to Priority 5 bond funding, which is generally lower priority construction authority for projects meant to be completed within the next 5 years. But it can keep a project in the state pipeline and help provide enough authority to award contracts when paired with other funding. Elsewhere, governors taking action and legislators having some reaction. 2 bills related to diversity policy and a third on immigration became law in North Carolina Wednesday over the governor's veto. Democratic Governor Josh Stein vetoing several bills, and a third bill on diversity policy next goes to the Senate, where an expected successful override would also make it law. The Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reporting the House Speaker Dennis Hall said that by overriding 4 more of Governor Stein's vetoes, they're improving quality of life and public safety and ending taxpayer-funded diversity through DEI policies for good. Hall said that once again the House stood firm and ensured Governor Stein had his liberal agenda won't get through in common sense legislation. Now, lawmakers, they overrode the Equality in State Agencies' prohibition on diversity, equity, and inclusion, eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion in public education, eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion in public higher education, and the North Carolina Border Protection Act. And finally, athletes and support staff for World Cup national teams training in California, they're set to face the second highest income tax rates for the duration of the matches. The only one with higher tax rates is Canada. The Center Square reporter Robert Matson tells us that professional soccer players salaried by the team during the World Cup, those salaries, as well as the combination of prize money and match fees paid by a nation's soccer federation to the player, are subject to a jock tax. Jock taxes refer to the taxes that athletes, coaches, trainers, support staff, etc., they pay to another state or country for the percentage of their income that they earned while they are away from their primary residence. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get those stories and more at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. And join us back here Friday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all across the country, only with the states. Powered by the Center Square.